time is limited and you're going to do a practice or study, it's very good to state your intention by reciting these prayers. So by doing all of them is really, really good. But when time is limited, if you just do the short refuge prayer and the 4 immeasurables, kind of covers the your motivation, your intention. So taking refuge and acknowledging the 4 immeasurable qualities of bodhicitta are the minimum, we would say. So I'll begin. Everybody can join me. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chonam la, shangju bardu dagni kapsuchi, dagi jinsoki pe sonamgi, Jola penshir sange jupasho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pe sem chen tam she dewa dang dewe gurdang dem par chi. Dug now dang donal gi gudang dra war chi. Dug now me pe dewa dang mi dra war chi. Nay ring chak dang ni dang dwell way, dang namla ne pa chi. Okay, so thank you. So tonight is the final week of our 8-week cycle. So we're going to talk about the 3 vehicles, just to review one thing, that we had listed the topics that we have been talking about. So we did the 5 families of the Buddha. We did the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. We did the 5 poisons and the 5 antidotes. We discussed the love, compassion, and the enlightened mind, which is bodhicitta. We discussed the 6 human realms, and we discussed karma, cause and result. And then we discussed the 4 noble truths. And tonight is the final, the 3 vehicles. So this gives a pretty good overview of fundamental, what we practice and reasons why we practice it, why we receive these teachings and so on. So we're going to start again on January 3rd, Monday night, January 3rd, next year, just 2-3 weeks away. And we're going to begin with Geshe from India is going to be giving us a teaching on the life of the Buddha. It is likely to take 2, maybe 3 sessions. So he'll be speaking in Tibetan, but we have a very excellent Tibetan translator, Dorje Damjul, who actually works for the Radio Free Asia. He is a Tibetan himself, and he is the person who translates the news for the people in Tibet, what's happening in America and so on, and also translates what's happening in Tibet back to what's happening, or for the people that are in America here. So his language skills are excellent. So that should be very, very interesting, very good to hear Geshe's story of the Buddha and Dorje's translation for that. So please join us for that. It should be very good. Okay.
What page are we looking at, or which booklet and things? And I like to follow along, and I'm not quite sure where we are.
All right. Well, that's good. Tonight, we are kind of switching a little bit, and there's two books that we use. One is called the Jewel Ornament Liberation, and that book that you have there in your hand, Jean, is an outline for that. Tonight, this teaching comes from Learning Buddhism, and I did not think to make this available to anybody, but some people have the book, and I can send out the PDF for that for this particular chapter. I think it's chapter 8 in that book, Learning Buddhism, which is a book that was written by our Khenpo Samdop, who is the spiritual director of our center in Virginia. So, if you have a clean sheet of paper and you want to take some notes, that would be very good. I'm going to try and keep it as simple as possible, but it's to give an understanding of what the different parts of Buddhism are. What the sequence of the Buddha's teachings over the many centuries have been, and so on, and what they represent, and so on. So that's what tonight's 3 vehicles will be about. So there's many different ways to talk about it. There's what they call the common vehicle. There's the path of the Bodhisattvas. There's the extraordinary vehicle. There's the common vehicle is the most fundamental teaching, is called the Hinayana Teachings. And maybe you've heard about that, the Hinayana, and these are fundamental teachings. Sometimes they're called the lesser teachings, but the people who follow these teachings by the Buddha, these simple teachings, sometimes have consider that lesser vehicle to be offensive, meaning that it's not as important as others, but actually it is the foundation of all the teachings, all the most complicated teachings. So today, the Theravadan people, who are mostly centered in Southeast Asia, in what is now Sri Lanka, what used to be Ceylon, and then going over into Southeast Asia, going into Burma and into Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and to parts of Vietnam, are Theravadan areas and so on, where the Theravadan Buddhists predominate, are most seen, and their teachings are teaching really discipline. That the first thing that we need to be able to do is to learn how to control our physical body, how to control our intellectual minds, and so on. So the very basic fundamental teachings are designed to instill discipline in people's minds. So the way I always like to relate it is 2,600 years ago, when Buddha Shakyamuni first began teaching, many of the people that he were teaching, were kind of wild people, is the way it's been explained. They were lawless, and they did many non-virtuous things and so on. But they had a yearning. They were influenced by the Buddha and said, okay, we want to follow this great teacher. And this great teacher, the Buddha, said, well, the first thing you got to do is you got to stop, being wild. So he says, and part of your wildness comes from your desire to want to have strong ego and to dominate other people and so on. So we got to be able to make everybody be the same. So one of the things that he insisted was that his followers all cut their hair. So much of our ego is associated with our appearance, the way we look. And our hair is a very important feature of our ego, of the way we look. So he said, everybody should clean shave their heads. So those people who would do that were, part of the community that followed the Buddha. The next thing he said, everybody should start wearing robes. Everybody wears the same thing. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or you're poor. Doesn't matter whether you're young or you're old. Doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. Everybody should wear the same type of clothes. So there was a simple shirt that they would wear. There was a simple kind of a skirt that they would wear. And then there was a shawl that they would wear. So it depended on where they were as to what color it might be. But in the beginning, it was a saffron color. It was a bright, kind of a yellow golden color. And the Theravadins still wear that. But today, if you go into Tibet, they're wearing red robes. If you go into China or you go into Korea, they're wearing gray robes. So there's probably other areas that have different color robes and so on that I may not be aware about, but they keep it, by culture. But nevertheless, the point is that everybody's wearing the same thing. So it's kind of creating this discipline that everybody is the same.
The same kind of rationale as the military.
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, that's absolutely true. And it works. It's very effective. So then another thing was that the Buddha said that everybody's going to, kind of live together, very close proximity of each other, either under the same roof or in the same area. And that everybody's going to get up early and everybody's going to start having prayers. And there was, prescribed prayers and practices that everybody would do. So all this was a means to be able to discipline people from going off and doing all these different tangents and so on. So I'm just checking my notes, making sure I don't leave anything out. So as the important things that were being taught in the Hinayana, in this first basic fundamental part of Buddhism, was the four noble truths. So we talked about this last week, that all life has suffering in it, that the cause of that suffering are our attachments, our aversions, our afflictive emotions that we talked about last time, and that we need to, what we want to do ultimately is to be free of this suffering. And the way to be free is to cut through it, is to stop doing it, is to renunciate that all these different things that we want in this life and so on that are creating these sufferings. And ultimately that our body, wanting to be born again is one of the things that we have to be able to say, I don't want to be born again. So we went into this a little bit last week, talking about the ideas of reincarnation, which is in the East and India and so on. Reincarnation is a common thread that runs between through all the different cultures there, that we've been born many times, that we have this life and that we die, but then we go on and then have other lives and so on. So the way in that's described is, rather complex. We can't do that right now. But the point is that the way to stop the suffering is to stop being born again. So, and we do that by a series of processes that allow us to be able to evaluate where we are, the this is called the Eightfold Path, which is part of the Four Noble Truths, recognize who we are, why we are doing these things, and to be able to apply ourselves with antidotes to those sufferings, to those causes, so that we're not creating these new ways in which we live and we attach and so on like that. So very fundamentally, this is the basis of the Hinayana. You know, they talk about enlightenment. They talk about enlightenment, but the enlightenment that is talked about is a very individual enlightenment, that you can go on and that you can purify yourself to a degree that when you die, when you give up your body, that you will be liberated from this body and so on. However, it was found, you know, by many people that discovered that there's much more to it than this. And that because this selfish desire, this selfish aspiration to be born again, or rather to be liberated, is a means of our attachment. And that became just another source of our be born as a human being again, because we were thinking of ourselves as being superior to other beings and so on. So the Buddha was teaching, you know, this different way to these people. At the same time, he was also, with the words he was using, he was also teaching a way called the Mahayana. The Mahayana are the Middleweight Teachings. And the Middleweight Teachings is teaching about brotherly and sisterly love, and that we affect other people and that other people affect us. Some people it didn't register with some people. They were very simple people. It didn't register with them. They only thought of it as a selfish way of life. Whereas these other people, the Mahayana people, they would recognize this, but it was very few people that did recognize this. It wasn't until several hundred years after the Buddha passed that the Mahayana teachings were kind of revived. They continued on from the time of the Buddha, but not many people were paying attention to them. It was only the very highest of practitioners, very highest of the monastics and so on, that would have been following that. So, and around the turn of the century, or not the century, but the turn of the millennium is about the time that the teachings called the Madhyamaka teachings came, which began to teach the ideal of the Bodhisattva, the holy enlightened being. Bodhi means enlightenment, and Sat is a being, and Sattva is a holy being. So it's the holy enlightened being. So the Bodhisattva is the idea that they are there for the benefit of other beings, that we rise from being an ordinary human being, going through different stages. It's a progressive stage path until we get to the point where everything that we do is for the enlightenment of other people, to help other people and so on. So the self is kind of not suppressed, but is kind of transformed into helping other people. And this helps us to be able to overcome our ego. So we're kind of giving our ego a job to do and not allowing our ego to kind of run away with us, you know, for our individual liberation. We're seeking to raise our consciousness level, to raise our activities for the benefit of the enlightenment of other beings. So this is called the middle way. This is called the Mahayana teachings, sometimes called the greater vehicle. So the Mahayanas would call it the greater vehicle, and then they would call, you know, what the Hinayana, you know, that was the lesser vehicle. But actually, to be able to do the Mahayana, you had to establish the Hinayana. You have to establish the the foundation of discipline to be able to build and be able to get to the point of the Mahayana. So the Mahayana became very popular and northern India and so on. And this was placing importance on the mind, where the Hinayana was in placing, importance on, the discipline of the physical body and what you did, what you thought and everything. But in the Mahayana, it was more concerned about what you're thinking and the motivation for why you're doing it and so on. So it says, if you had a virtuous mind, if you have a virtuous mind, that your body and your speech will follow your virtue from your mind. And the mind being the heart center, being the big mind, the intellect being the little mind, our speech being the agent, if you will, of the little mind, of the intellect. That what we say, what we do is thought of in the mind first, in the brain first, in the little mind first, and then we go out and we do it and so on. So, and the physical body is just carrying all this out. But the big mind, the heart, is something that is beyond just the little mind and the physical body. That when we die, the little mind and the physical body die. But the big mind, this heart, this true nature, carries on because it is indestructible. So it's like in a way, it's, for now, when we first recognize that, we say it's like a guest within ourselves. But actually, it is our very nature. And as we become more and more transformed into becoming a bodhisattva, a holy enlightened being, does that true nature now, does that what seemed to be a guest now become the permanent inhabitant within ourselves? So in the Mahayana, we're working for that. We're trying to do that. So it says that the Mahayana focuses on taming and taking control of the mind, taming and taking control of the mind with the wish to benefit others. So the primal cause of everything that we do is for others, not selfishly for ourselves. The mind is the creator of all our virtue and non-virtue. So the mind, we're talking about our little mind, is the creator of virtue and non-virtue. But if we take control of this mind here, we avoid non-virtue and we begin to practice virtue. So this goodness comes from our true nature. But this true nature is being interpreted by our little mind. And the little mind will rationalize all different kinds of things and will rationalize non-virtue and so on like that. And we can go off on our tangents and be confused thinking that we're doing good things when actually we are just, making more suffering for ourselves and for other beings. So we need to be able to recognize the true mind, our big mind. So the mind is most important. The big mind is most important. The little mind can cover up the big mind. And the body and speech are like servants of the mind, the big mind. So the analogy I always like to use, and many of you have seen me talk about this many times, is our big mind is like a diamond. It's indestructible. And the big mind is made up of the four vast, immeasurable qualities. The quality of loving kindness, the quality of compassion, the quality of empathetic joy, and the quality of equanimity, of sameness of all things, all people, all sentient beings and so on, all being equal. So this is this is what the diamond is made of. But this diamond has many facets to it. And the different facets are the different activities of that wholly enlightened mind, the way in which it actualizes that bodhicitta. The problem is that this diamond can get blocked up. It can get blocked up by our emotions, by our confusions, by our mental misconceptions, by our habitual tendencies. So what we need to do is one by one, through a process of going through and examining what our sufferings are, what causes the sufferings, and then using the antidotes, do we begin to remove those blockages, and then the light of this holy enlightened mind begins to come through, and we begin to catch glimpses of it. So this comes through, it's introduced in the Hinayana, but it really becomes more perfected in the Mahayana. So the great ideal of the Mahayana is to be this bodhisattva, to be this holy enlightened being. The ideal of the Hinayana is to be what we call the Arhat. And this is one who is on the path, a renunciate, who has gone on the path to become enlightened, and they go off by themselves to be enlightened and so on. So when we first talked about the 5 families of the Buddha, one of the families we talked about was the hearer, or the Shravaka. And these are those beings who have a very narrow point of view about what enlightenment is. And it's a very selfish enlightenment and so on. So they have a devotion, but it's to their enlightenment, it's to their betterment and so on. And they're not really concerned with other people's enlightenment. They have compassion for their suffering, but they're not working to help them necessarily. In Mahayana, they're very dedicated to working for other people and so on, to help them with their suffering, to overcome their suffering. So, and we're doing this through the big mind, that this becomes what we can transmit from our mind can help other people. We may not physically be able to help them. We may not be able to lead people to enlightenment, but through our pure nature, through our pure big mind, we can transmit, we can have a heart thoughts that go from us to other beings and so on. So we're developing that, we're understanding that. So out of this, we're developing a devotion for our teachers, a devotion for the Buddha. The Buddha, the teachers are like emanations of the Buddha, who developed all this Dharma teaching. And so the teachers, then we have devotion for them, and we're seeing them as the Buddha. So, and we're having devotion for the enlightenment of other beings. So through that devotion. And the Hinayana, again, it's much more selfish. So the Mahayanists would say that it is the mind that colors what the body and what the little mind do. So if we have a clear vision, if we have a clear, pure motivation in our heart center, then what we do is going to be for the benefit of others, to help them to attain the same thing. The mind is the boss. The big mind here is the boss. So those are the first 2 of the vehicles. The third one is called the secret vehicle, or the secret mantra vehicle. And this is the vehicle of wisdom. This is the wisdom of the Buddha. This would be, let me see, I want to say this right. So I just want to check my notes here, make sure. This is the wisdom transformation, the wisdom transformation. So if we apply the word method, that The method of the Hinayana is discipline. The method of the Mahayana is loving kindness, devotion. And then the method of the third group of the Vajrayana is the wisdom transformation, the wisdom of the Buddha. So this third group is called the Vajrayana. Vajra is a Sanskrit word that means indestructible wisdom. Vajra, V-A-J-R-A, Vajra. It's also sometimes called secret, the secret yana, or the mantrayana. Mantra is the recitations that we make, the utterances that we make when we are doing chanting and so on. And through this mantra, through this secret practices and secret teachings, we are bringing into ourselves our own awareness of our true nature, which is here in our heart center. So we say it's secret because if it's misunderstood, it can be taken to be egocentric. It can be taken to be manipulative of other beings and so on. So we keep it secret to ourselves because this is something that we are endeavoring to do, and not everybody's going to understand it. It's not totally secret in that we wouldn't discuss it with somebody else. We would talk with it with our teachers, with our lamas, with our gurus. We would talk about it with our brothers and sisters who are on the path along with us. But we wouldn't necessarily be walking up to somebody on the street and saying, hey, guess what I did today? And I had this experience or something like that. And by the way, I want to teach you how to do it. Let me teach you how to do it. And so you can save yourself and all this. We wouldn't do that. We keep it secret just to be able to keep from harming, keep other people from harming themselves. Because if it's not given out, if it's not described, if it's not transmitted in the correct way, then people can either have the result of saying, you know what, that is crazy, I can't follow that. And it contaminates whatever future thought they may have about the Dharma. They won't go near the Dharma because the first time they heard about it, somebody completely confused it for them. Or that they listen to it, they take in some piece of it, and then they go out and they start doing things as if they were some kind of a teacher themselves or something, and then people get confused, and then it becomes bad for the person who goes and does something like that. It becomes a source of ego attachment. So we keep it secret to ourselves. So this indestructible wisdom now is there within ourselves, and we have that as part of our true nature. We're born with that. But again, it's all blocked up. So as we begin to purify and remove the blockages and so on, the obscurations that are blocking up our true nature, then we start having glimpses of that light that is coming through those blockages, and we begin to have insight. We begin to have things coming up, thoughts, heart thoughts that are coming up, that are pointing us in that direction. They are showing us our true nature. And we need to be able to interpret those things correctly. So for us as ordinary human beings, it's very easy to get confused, to get lost in what those ideas are and so on. So the idea of having a teacher, a guru, is very, very important, so to be able to instruct us as to how we need to be able to take this in, how we need to process it, and how we are able to actualize this. So there's an analogy here, and that is that if you wanted to go someplace, let's say a far off city that you've never been to. So I always use the example of New York, and if you're born in this mid-Atlantic area and you want to go up to New York, never been there, and you start asking people, how do I get there? And you talk to 10 different people and they give you 10 different ways in which to go up there or something like that. And you say, well, this is very confusing. I don't know how to do this. But then you find somebody who says, oh, I know how to get there. Let me tell you exactly. I've been there before. I'll tell you exactly the way to go there. And then you listen to that person and maybe you go there, but because of your natural tendencies to not want to pay attention, you kind of drift off in this direction, you drift off in that direction, you get lost here, you get lost there, you have to find your way back and so on. But what if you find somebody who says, I've been there, and by the way, I'll be happy to take you there to New York. And then you find that that person can take you, can guide you the whole way, and you get very simply from where you are up to New York. So that's an analogy for if New York were enlightenment. So you want to find a guide who has had experience, who has had realization, who understands the pathway and so on. So in the Hinayana, it might be that you're hearing all these different things from different people. In the Mahayana, they might be saying, oh, it's up this way and you follow this direction and so on. But when it comes to the Vajrayana, now you're following a guru. Now you're following somebody who has been there and is taking you along with them to enlightenment. So this is what we would want to do. As we do that, we are developing the mind of the Buddha, the enlightened mind of the Buddha. In Vajrayana, in Hinayana, we're developing the discipline. In Mahayana, we're developing the devotion to want to do that. But in Vajrayana, we're developing the wisdom to be able to do that. And we begin to recognize all these insight thoughts that are coming up to us and recognizing them all as thoughts of enlightenment, all thoughts of our true nature. And they may be duplicitous. They may be of our dualistic nature. And that's why we say we bring all these thoughts onto the path. Sometimes they may seem to be non-virtuous, but we bring that non-virtue onto the path. They may be virtuous, and that's very easy to bring on the path. But what we find is that we bring all this onto the path, and the path has, for ordinary beings, has all this dualistic nature. But for the Buddha, for one who has this Vajrayana point of view, we see that we can move along very, very directly with one-pointed mindfulness. There's nothing to pull us apart because we brought everything onto the path, and we can recognize everything as being ordinary beings. What we're transcending is our ordinary nature. So if all these thoughts of our ordinary nature, our dualistic nature, are on the path, now we can't get lost because we see everything for what it is. We see the path for what it is. We see our human nature for what it is. But we decide that it's important for us to transcend ourselves from getting lost. So we control ourselves, we control our mind. The mind is the master. The intellectual body and the physical body are the servants to the big mind. So what we're doing through the Vajrayana now is we're developing the mind and all of its permutations, being able to see and be able to develop that one-pointed mindfulness of transcendence. So of course, saying this, it sounds very easy, but the actualization of this takes a great deal of effort, takes time, and takes having a teacher, having the guru, having the one who is guiding us, who has been there, because otherwise it's very easy for us to get lost along the way and so on. There's another analogy. If we say as human beings, ordinary human beings, that we have this suffering, sufferings of ignorance, sufferings of hatred, sufferings of desire, sufferings of jealousy and of envy, and all the different things, greediness, pridefulness, all these different sufferings that come as a result of those 5 afflictive emotions and so on. So we can look at that as though we're sick, that there's this illness that we have that is part of being a human being. Doesn't mean that we are entirely that way, but it means that if we're not, we haven't purified, we're very easily pulled in all those directions and so on, as if we are sick. So realizing that, we go to the hospital and we check ourselves in, and they give us a very nice place to go, and they might put us in some kind of isolation in the hospital. And the isolation is there designed to protect us from further illness, as well as protecting others who might be in the immediate area from getting contaminated from our illness. So going into the hospital is a form of discipline, of being able to limit our disease, whatever it might be. Then when we go into the hospital now, we are greeted and we are being taken care of by the nurses. The nurses are there and they are making us comfortable. They're giving us a good place to be. They're making sure that we have the right food. They're making sure that we have the right drinks to eat and so to drink and so on. Excuse me. The right comfort to be warm when we need to be warm and so on. All the things that we need to be able to be comfortable, to be able to start our healing process. This is the nurses, and this would be the devotion of the Mahayana. Those beings who are devoted to helping us to be comfortable, to be able to find enlightenment for ourselves through by making them comfortable and so on, through loving kindness. So that's the analogy for the nurses in the hospital. But then the doctor comes in, the physician comes in, who talks with us and examines us and analyzes what the doctor finds and processes a solution to cure us with medicine. So maybe the medicine is Dharma Teachings. Maybe the medicine are certain kinds of herbs and pills and things like that. Maybe the medicine is some kind of surgery or something to be able to rid us of some kind of an infection or whatever that we have in our body. So this wisdom of the doctors then is like the Vajrayana, to be able to cure us, recognize the causes of our illness, prescribe the medicine for us, and then be able to heal us. So this is an analogy for the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana, thinking of ourselves as being ill and then having the benefits of the hospital, the nurses, and the doctors to help ourselves. As we progress along the path in the Vajrayana, we begin to recognize these 3 vehicles. The Hinayana may only recognize the Hinayana and may not validate the practices or the teachings of the Mahayana. The Mahayana will definitely appreciate and recognize the teachings of the Hinayana and may have an appreciation and know that the Vajrayana is there, but yet is focused on the devotion. Maybe their lives are simple and The devotion is what they can bring together, bring to bear, and they will do that. And that's a very good thing to do. The discipline is a very good thing to do. In the Vajrayana, they recognize the discipline, they recognize the devotion, and they recognize the wisdom. All three are being worked on all at the same time. So, as I said before, back in the day of the Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who was teaching, he was teaching these three levels of teaching, these three vehicles simultaneously. And certain people would hear the discipline part. Some people would hear the devotion part. And other people would hear the wisdom part. So it's there for all beings. We go through many turns of the wheel, so to speak, the turnings of the Dharma teachings. So the Dharma teachings can be likened to that. First was the teaching of the discipline. Then came the teaching of the devotion. Then came the teaching of the wisdom. So in our tradition, in the Tibetan Buddhism, it is the wisdom teachings that are emphasized. So, however, but the other teachings, the discipline and the devotion, are never marginalized or suppressed. They are brought to bear on supporting us for the wisdom teachings. Does anybody have any comments or questions at this time? Is this making some sense? Is this a little too abstract?
How important is it to learn the language of these various stages of things? Does that help you get through them, or?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you first said, but so rather not try and figure it out. You tell me again, please.
How important is it to learn the language, the Mahayana, the different
The vocabulary.
the vocabulary, right?
Well, I think it's rather important because some words just don't translate into English, at least not very concisely. So many of the books that we have glossaries in them. And they're indispensable. So being able to learn, these different words and so on is very important. Just like if we go into any other kind of endeavor, if we want to be a lawyer or a doctor, we will become a carpenter, whatever, there's a vocabulary that goes along with any of those job descriptions. That outside of that job, you may not use those words, but yet when you're working with your other people and everything, you can say those words and people know exactly what you mean. So there is something that we have to learn as we move forward.
It's kind of a barrier, at least at first.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Of course it is. And I appreciate that, you've been with us, 2 or 3 times now and not had the benefit of being with us at the very beginning. And many of us have been through this many times. So that's why we repeat things over and over and over again. So, so please stay with it. And I find it indispensable to make notes, and those words that we don't know, to write them down and then maybe ask a question. Maybe we're directed to a particular book, or maybe we can give you a succinct answer, so you don't have to go around thinking, well, what does that word mean? So this is a discussion, that's what Buddhism 101 is supposed to be. It's a little bit of a teaching, but also a little bit of a discussion so that we can have a dialogue and understand these things.
Lance?
Yes.
You said that Tibetan Buddhism teaches Vajrayana. what other type of Buddhism teaches Mahayana or the Hinayana?
Well, the Hinayana is taught mostly, like I said, in Southeast Asia. My understanding, my limited understanding, most of it, and you'll see the Theravadins. You know, the Theravadins are those that carry on that tradition today, and they usually are wearing those brightly yellow golden robes. You know, they from Southeast Asia and so on. And in many ways, that they're very good. They're very devout. They're lovely people. And in many of the pilgrimage places in India, and I've been to them, that they are managed and taken care of by the Theravada monks who would spend time in these places in India. You know, they take on the responsibility of making sure that these places are as pristine as they possibly can be for the different pilgrims who are coming in and so on. So
Would the
these different
forest-
groups, do mix between themselves.
Yeah. Would the forest monks be in that Hinayana category? Do you know?
I think so. Maybe somebody else has more to comment about that, but I think so. That's referring to the forest monks, to the ascetics,
Okay.
to those who have given up everything, all their lives and so on, in a very austere way, as the Theravadins have. So
Mhm.
it's more of a strict discipline than the Mahayanas or the Vajrayanas would be.
And what area or group would be the Mahayana?
Well, the Mahayanas are often referred to as the Pure Land Buddhists,
Oh, the Pure Land.
the
Okay.
Pure Land Buddhists, or the Buddha Field Buddhists.
Okay.
And they talk more about like the Sambhogaya deities. They talk more about the different meditation Buddhas, because they're developing the mind more. Than the Hinayana, it's more about actions, discipline of the physical body. But the
So that would
Pure
be
Land,
more
yes,
of Zen approach,
say that again.
or of the Zen approach.
The Zen approach, the Zen
Ah.
are Pure Land Buddhists, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So Tom, comes from that tradition originally. Tom, do you have any comment about that?
About the Mahayana path?
Yeah, about the Pure Land, and you know a little bit more about that than I do directly, and maybe Michael has some more insight about that.
Well, Michael would know as well. The Zen monks are very, they take from a lot of the Hinayana, the Theravadins, very disciplined, almost to the point they're regimented, eating 1 square meal a day, and that's before 11 o'clock. Getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning every day, doing their practice, working the field, then eating, and then spending the rest of the day meditating and teaching. But it's very they take the discipline very, very seriously. That it's not to eat too much, not to sleep too much, not to talk too much. Out of 6 months out of the year, they don't even speak. You're not even allowed to approach them in a monastery. Matter of fact, 6 months out of the year, people aren't even allowed in certain parts of the monastery, so they don't engage in speech with the monks.
The Vietnamese temple near us here in Virginia Beach are Pure Land, but they're not strict of everything like you're speaking of.
Your microphone went off, Tom.
Yeah, they're very, very disciplined, in that fact. Their regimen, their daily activities are very scheduled.
Yes.
Until they go to a retreat, or so there's some in the Zen practice, they go to retreat in the mountains for years at a time,
Mhm.
and they wear a white outfit underneath their regular robes. And usually in Asian culture, well, the white is worn for people that are dead or getting ready to be cremated or buried. So basically, it's a sign that I'd rather die than not awaken. So that's the mentality they take to these retreats. You know, that they meditate all day. They're saying they meditate all day, and in the evening they cry themselves to sleep,
Mhm.
not understanding why they haven't awakened yet. So you know, it's a very it's a hard way of going, but it's very rewarding at the as well. You know, and I'm sure Michael can elaborate on that quite a bit as well, being in the Japanese order, the Pure Land.
Well, the Pure Land, Pure Land core is from the Pure Land Sutra. The Buddha taught the Pure Land Sutra, and in Pure Land, the Buddha Amitabha, in the Japanese sect called Amida, is the primary conduit to enlightenment, and the Pure Land is the place where Buddhas and Bodhisattvas end up. So in Pure Land Buddhism, you get to see for the first time the totally elaborated concept of a Bodhisattva.
Would you say that in the old country, wherever it is, you know, from the East, that, you know, things are much more strict, much more traditional, but as things have moved out into the West and so on, a lot of that rigidity has softened up a little bit. So, you know, you see things have been more westernized, and you could question whether, you know, that's been effective or not. But what would you think about that, Michael or
Well, I know
Tom?
the monk that facilitates the English speaking group at the Pure Land Temple here, he always refers to it as American Buddhism,
Right.
like you're saying. And their main practice is sutras and chanting of mantras.
Yeah, the Jodo Shinshu, which was the sect that I sat with, which is the Pure Land sect, the Japanese sect, it has been transformed considerably, coming to the West, originally starting just prior to World War II, and it was actually transformed considerably inside of the internment camps. Yeah, and yes, there are considerable secrets still. So there is some discipline, especially a hierarchy around who gets to do certain kinds of practices and teachings on the sutras, and it's mantra based as well. So in the Nichiren sect, you've probably heard of the Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, the Daimoku, and in the Jodo Shinshu sect, it's called the Nembutsu. They're the people of the Nembutsu, which is Namo Amida Butsu. I take refuge in Amida Buddha.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have a question or comment to make about this?
I think you've laid it out pretty well.
Well, thank you. Well, there's another interesting analogy. I think analogies are really good. You know, there's an analogy that there is a poisonous tree that is among our orchard or whatever. and that this poisonous tree, of course, has roots that go down into the ground. And there's the trunk, and then there's the many branches, and the leaves and the fruit on the trees are all contaminated, are all poisonous. So the different approaches to being able to deal with that tree can be expressed in the view of the three different vehicles. So in the Hinayana view, they might say, oh, we got to get rid of that tree. Let's dig it up and take it and drive it away, drag it away to some other place, and somebody else will deal with it. Either it's going to decay on its own, and all that poison is going to go wherever it goes, but it's out of our sight. We're not going to deal with it anymore. And that can be effective. Then the Mahayanas might say, oh, there's an intelligent way to do this, that we can do this, we can destroy this tree without having to do all that work by simply taking boiling hot water and pouring it into the roots of the tree. And over time, that tree by itself, because of the boiling hot water over and over again, that tree will die. And then all the poison and so on will be gone. We just need to pick up the fruits and the limbs and everything and dispose of it. And it'll die on its own accord by applying the wisdom, the method of pouring the boiling hot water on there. So that's effective, but it takes a long time to do that. And still, there can be contamination that is happening in that process, and they still have to deal with the decaying material and so on that's falling from the dying tree. And then there is the Vajrayana approach that says, let's take the tree to the laboratory and let's analyze the tree and try and understand what poisoned it. And from that poison, let's make an antidote. Let's make a vaccine so that we can protect others. So that's a very good analogy about talking about the point of view of each of the groups. You know, it goes from a very, very narrow point of view to one that is very broad. We talk about in scientific terms, we talk about, in quantum physics, we say that all this stuff is happening, and that the closer we get to the analysis of what it is that's happening and the causes of that happening, we ourselves are affecting the result of those happenings and so on. So that goes very closely to the Vajrayanas, who are, it's the wisdom tradition. And not to be disparaging of the other groups, but it requires more intellectual discipline. It requires more attention to detail and so on, to be able to figure this out, to work at this and so on. And within the Vajrayana, within this type of Buddhism, is the more of the esoteric sciences. When they talk about things like astrology, and they talk about, the science things, the medical things, what I'm trying to think of, and more about mathematics and things like that, more intellectual thought, but that which is involved more with the world, because it's taking what the world offers and not saying everything in the world is bad, but bringing that which is in the world and bringing it onto the path and saying, well, how can we use it for the benefit of other beings? Instead of just cutting it off and saying, oh, I'm just not going to be involved with the world. And that's how I'm going to cease suffering, just by cutting it off and just putting on blinders, just having a very narrow point of view in my life.
Is wisdom a higher virtue than brotherly love?
I don't know that it's higher, I couldn't say what the academics might say about that. I think, you can't have one without the other. As a matter of fact, one of the terms that are used for loving kindness is wisdom.
But
It's the
this
same thing.
this 1, 2, and 3, I thought were hierarchical. I thought they were a progression.
It may start that way, but they really are happening. It's more like dice that are sitting on top of each other.
Mhm.
One is not growing into the other, but they're supporting each other.
Yeah, okay,
It's more like a Venn diagram.
I see.
When you take three spheres and you bring the three spheres together, in the center, all three spheres are represented, but as you move out, the sphere 1 and sphere 2 are involved, but sphere 3 isn't, and so on like that. You understand my point, I think.
Yes, I think, yes.
So it's more like that.
Thank you.
Mhm. So it says that in secret Mahayana and secret mantra, the Vajrayana, that we enter the mandala of the deity. Sometimes this is called, this is where the deity yoga. Deity are these facets of this indescribable, indestructible diamond, their true nature. So the deities are not gods. In our tradition, we don't think of deities as gods. And you look up in the dictionary, you might say that a deity is a god, but in our tradition, we don't think of it that way. We don't talk about it that way. But the deities are the expressions, are the actualizations of this true nature that we have. So they have their different activities that they do and so on. So each one of these deities, each one of these activities is like a palace. And this is where the idea of the Buddha fields come from. That this particular deity, this particular, say, Amitabha, has this particular Pure Land, this particular Buddha field, with these particular other deities that are all part of that family and so on. So to understand the wisdom of that particular deity who is actualizing that wisdom in some way, we have to become that deity. We can learn about it vicariously by reading the books and so on like that. But that only gets us so far, because when we die, all that memory is just gone. We haven't really changed anything about ourselves, our true nature. We haven't done anything to enrich our true nature or to recognize our true nature. So through our practices, we become the deity. And this is something that is special to the Vajrayana. This wisdom tradition is to become the deity, to become Amitabha, to become Ascobia, Medicine Buddha, et cetera, that have all these different names. And they have activities like compassion, like wisdom, like devotion, like wisdom of discriminating awareness, all accomplishing wisdom. They have all-pervading wisdom. They have all these different areas in which they are focused. But all together, the essence is still the same as this loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. But the way in which they are actualizing it then is what gives them, what seems to be a unique identity. But that's only just for our human mind to be able to comprehend. This is part of the genius of the Buddha, of Shakyamuni Buddha. When he first attained enlightenment, all this stuff just came to him. He recognized all this wisdom within himself. And for weeks, he paced around thinking, how can I understand this? How can I tell anybody about this? Who would understand this? Who would appreciate this? Who would think that I haven't lost my mind or something like that? So part of his genius was to be able to find a way to be able to describe the method that he used to attain this awareness, realizing that everybody has this true nature within themselves. All beings, all sentient beings have this true nature. And because of their blockages, their obscurations, they can't see it. But he was able to remove those blockages for himself. And he was able to articulate that process that became what we call the Dharma Teachings. So that we all, being Buddha naturally, now have a way to be able to remove the blockages that are covering that up. And then we realize that, and then we say, oh, now I see I'm the Buddha. I'm the same as the Buddha. So this is all part of the Vajrayana, which is giving us the tools of understanding those wisdoms. So we go through this process of recognizing ourselves as all these constituent parts of our true nature. And it only takes one to realize the essence of this true nature. It only takes one to recognize that. But many of us aren't satisfied with one, or that we need more nuance to be able to recognize how it works. So maybe we learn about two of these deities, or maybe three, or maybe four, or maybe five. And then we start seeing, oh, there's a system here. There's a pattern here. And this is the way our brain works, because this is what we're doing. We're intellectualizing what this is. And then we begin able to see it. But then at some point, we have a threshold that we cross that says, you know what? They're all the same. It's all made of the same stuff. And that I recognize that within myself, and I see that with all other beings. And this is the way that we can say that all the different traditions of human beings in the essence of that spirituality is the same. Because this is not unique to Buddha. Buddha doesn't have any exclusivity to this true nature. It does have a point of view. It does have a way of articulating it. It does have a body of work to be able to describe it and so on. But so do the other traditions. I'm talking about Judaism. I'm talking about Hinduism. I'm talking about Christianity. I'm talking about Muslim, whatever. They've got their way of being able to explain this. How accessible it is, how articulate it is, and being able to do that is something you can talk about, is something we can discuss and so on. The thing about the Buddhism that personally I care for and is that it's so available. And there's so many teachers to help, and there's so many support who are really committed to the devotion, who are really committed to the discipline, who are really committed to the becoming the embodiment of these deities that supports us. And that's very rich.
An analogy that I encountered somewhere was the analogy of a mountain, and at the base of the mountain, there are all these different camps that represent different religious traditions, or maybe even the sects within one division, within one tradition. But as the adherents of these various camps, those that do progress up the mountain, as they get to the top of the mountain, the difference is the peak of the mountain, as they approach it, that narrows, and they come more and more together. And their common truths. I mean, the differences fall away, and the essence is the same for all of them. Or
Yeah. And I think we can see that, we can see it today. The Dalai Lama meets, Desmond Tutu and the Pope and all these other great leaders. And you can see that, that they have much more in common, of the essence of their spirituality. So yeah, that's a good analogy. I never heard that before, but that's a very good analogy. That encompasses, that has the point of view of all the different,
Right.
civilization, cultures, spiritual cultures, and so on.
right,
And the religious aspect of it, the word religion implies a belief in a supreme being. If you look it up in the dictionary, that's the major definition, I think. Buddhism is not a religion. It's not intended to be a religion. It was never stated to be a religion. It's a philosophy. It's a philosophy of recognizing the self and being able to transcend the self through the spirit. And the spirit is not contained in any one of us. We are part of the spirit. We are part of all this. And spirit, if you look that up in the dictionary, and that may be in the 6th or 7th or 8th, definition of the word spirit or spiritual, you'll find connection. So for us, that's spirituality, is that we are connected to all things, to all beings, whether they are animate beings, whether they're humans, whether they're animals or they're insects or they're invisible beings that we can't see, or that they are inanimate objects, that they are trees, that they are grass, that they are the water, that they are the air, that all these things that physically, when we break them down, all break down into atomic, subatomic structures and so on. We're all made of the same stuff. And so, as I said before, we're bringing all that onto the path. In Vajrayana, all that becomes part of is the path. So for us in the Vajrayana, the perfection is not the result. The perfection is being on the path and maintaining the path for ourselves and for others. So going back to the definition of secret mantra or the secret vehicle, can you see now how this the very subtleties of the Vajrayana can become very confusing to us who have heard it a few times and so on like that, can become confusing to us. But imagine trying to talk to other people about this, explain this to other people and so on. This is why we keep it secret, and not try and proselytize it, not to become, too evangelical about it, because it would just drive people further away. And we don't want to do that. We want to bring people in. We do that through our practices. So this true nature has 4 enlightened activities. The enlightened activity of pacification. When there's trouble, when there's confusion, we first try and settle it down, pacify it, make it cool, make it calm, you know? But sometimes that doesn't work. That stuff that's happening is very turbulent, it's very powerful. So then if we can't calm it down through pacification, then we go to the next activity. The next activity is enriching or increasing knowledge, trying to understand it, trying to get it to understand itself, what that trouble is. And maybe that trouble's within ourselves. You know, that's what's bothering us. That's what's causing the suffering, is our reaction to all this stuff around us or within ourselves. So if we can't pacify ourselves, then we try and enrich ourselves by learning, you know, what all these causes are. We go to school or whatever, we try and figure it out. But maybe that doesn't work. And then we go to what we try and magnetize. You know, if that trouble, you know, it's easiest to be able to use the analogy that it's outside of ourselves. Instead, now we try and magnetize it through our practices, through our heart center that is inseparable from all beings, that is spiritual, that we are spiritually magnetizing, we're drawing that in, that confusion, that negativity, we're drawing it in. Once we draw it in, now we can enrich it and we can pacify it. And maybe so magnetize it. But then maybe it's more powerful than that. So now we have to really get more fierce. And so we have to subdue it. We have to control it in a way that is very powerful, but it requires great, great, great compassion and great wisdom so as to not do greater harm to it, to ourselves or to others who are carrying that negativity. We have to subdue it. So as I say, we have to do it with great skill. Then when we subdue it, now we can apply the magnetism. We can apply the enriching. We can apply the pacification. So different deities, going back to this, are capable of doing those different things. Ultimately, it comes down to one, but sometimes it requires more attention or more work, more effort. So we see this within ourselves, you know, and we can see this in our own family dynamics. You know, we've got children, we've got grandchildren, we've got brothers and sisters and family and so on. And, you know, families have their problems. And sometimes in the beginning, maybe you try and pacify it or someone. And then maybe that doesn't work. You try and educate it. You try and add more to try and understand it more. And that doesn't work. And then you try and pray to it. You try and magnetize it. You try and bring it in. And that doesn't work. And then finally, you got to do something really, really, really heavy duty, like subduing it. So we can see that in our own families, the way we do that. With our children, we can't turn away from it. We have to rescue our children. If we see them running out into the street and you see a bus coming down the street or a big trailer, a tractor trailer coming down the street, you're not going to wait to rationalize that kid running into the street. You're going to run after him and you're going to grab that kid. And if you knock him into the street and he blasts against a parked car and hurts himself, well, you know, you did what you had to do to save him from being crushed by the tractor trailer. That's an example of that great fierce power of subduing. It may hurt, but you had to do something to rescue them. So this secret mantra, so I'm making the case about this secret mantra, why we're calling it secret. It's not secret in the way of saying, you're not good enough to have this. I'm sorry, I'm not going to share this with you. But if you really want to hear it, let me help you educate yourself so that you prepare yourself to be able to understand this. So where do you do that? How do you do that? You got to start at the very beginning. As Jean pointed out, we got to have a common language. We got to have a vocabulary in which to understand some of these very subtle things that don't translate very easily into our language. It's like another language. So we got to do that. Then we got to see the systems, the way the systems work and so on. So this is what we've been going through. This is what Buddhism 101 and these 8 sessions started with. We started with the very basic system. And then each week, it kind of built up and built up and built up to get to this point. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Something Gary said last time that has resonated with me, and I'm not sure how it fits in here, but he talked about every day having to set himself, like setting a compass. I mean, in order to in order to be able to follow the noble truths and the Eightfold Paths, and I never thought it was an interesting image to me. You know, it doesn't just happen. I mean, you have to set yourself, which I think I've not done enough of. I mean, either in Buddhism or other places. But Gary, did I do violence to what you said?
No, you're really pretty much spot on. I've been practicing for a couple of years, and there are people here who have been practicing for 30, 40 years or all their lives. So for me, when I begin every day, it is very easy, and I often do at the beginning of every day, retreat into the habitual tendencies that I've spent a lifetime developing. And so my practice is not very mature compared to other people here. And I'm not saying that the others here don't have to have some sort of practice that they do to set their view for the day and their direction for the day. But I know that for me, every day I have on my phone, it pops up first thing in the morning, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, which just simply causes me to think and consider for a while what is going to be my path through the day and what is going to guide me in my relation to myself and to other people. And so my practice, as I said, is still very immature, and it requires a lot of self-guidance and a lot of resetting. I hope that explains it somewhat.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that.
I guess what I don't understand is how these concepts translate into daily life. I mean, I understand what you just said, Gary, about, you know, setting your mind for the day. in a sense, but what I don't see, how do these things, I mean, you talk about the heart being this major source of your caring and your compassion, but I don't see where that ever comes up. It sounds to me a lot of this stuff is sort of intellectualizing. I'm not getting how.
Can I try and explain that?
What?
Can I try and explain that?
Yeah, it'd be wonderful.
Gene, don't fall over into the water. It sort of looks like you're leaning back into. Yeah. Stay on
The
the bridge.
the natural state of our mind, of our big mind, is peace, is the quietude. And it's,
What do you mean the natural state? How does that happen? I mean, it seems to me that that's something you're striving for, not, it doesn't just happen naturally.
no, it happens naturally. That's the natural state. And the
Sit-
problem is that we have all this stuff that we allow to
Yeah.
interfere with that natural. We don't want to, where our ego is saying, I don't want you to do that because my ego wants to have identity. Our ego wants to do something. Our ego wants to be active and do all these things. So it's blocking up that quietude. And that's where the peacefulness is. That's where our state of mind is. Our true state of mind is, our big mind. So what are our thoughts? So you said that there's intellectual thoughts, that we're talking about intellectual stuff. And that's true, because we have to identify that which is blocking up this true nature, this quietude. What is our mind doing? Can you stop your mind from thinking? So what is your mind thinking about? So in one of our practices that we did, like in the second, third week of this cycle of teachings, we talked about the 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma. And in that practice is something called the 8 worldly concerns. And what we are thinking about is gain and loss. How much time do we spend thinking about what I have, what I want to have more, and what happens if I lose it? And how much I'm worried about losing it. How much time do we think about that? Then, if we're not thinking about that, maybe we're thinking about pleasure and pain. We're thinking about the things that I enjoy. I'm thinking about my loved ones. I'm thinking about how I enjoy being in my home or something like that. But then I think about, oh, so-and-so is sick. Oh, so-and-so is just died. Or that so-and-so has left me. Or I need to get out of this relationship because it brings me such pain. 20 years ago, it was a wonderful relationship. But now it's turned and now it's become a painful relationship. How much time do we think about pleasure and pain? Our body, when we were 19, 20 years old, how much we enjoyed our body. And we did so many things with no regard that there was not going to be a time that we couldn't do these things. Now, everything is a pain to us. The age of our lives and so on. We get up out of bed in the morning and, we got 3 or 4 pains we got to deal with. And by the time we go to bed, we got another 3 or 4 pains we got to deal with. And there was 5 or 6 during the day that we had to deal with. So how much time do we think about pleasure and pain?
Keep cheering us up, Lance.
Well, I'm making the point. Gene asked, and I'm telling her. So now praise and blame. How much time do we think about praise and blame? How much time do we think, oh, I've done such a good thing in my family. Oh, I've done such a good thing at work. Oh, but they gave me such awards. Oh, I had my own parking place. Oh, I was the top of the top of the department. I had all this stuff. It was so wonderful. But then something happened that was in my department, or something happened in my family that I brought together that now has been shattered. And now I'm blamed for it. Now, all of a sudden, I'm responsible for losing that big account that we had in the office, or I got this new car, and how wonderful this car is, and how great it is. But, I had to get a second job to support this car. So now my wife and children are blaming me for being away from the house so I can support this car. They'd like to take a ride in it, but meanwhile, they don't get me to be with them in their house. So now I'm being blamed for my delinquent son who is going around doing terrible things, and the police are coming to the house every 4 days. How much time do we think about praise and blame? And then if we're not thinking about that, how much time do we think about fame and disgrace? Maybe it's my fame, but maybe I have a hero, and my hero has such great fame. Maybe he's a political hero. Maybe he's a sports hero. Maybe he's an intellectual hero who writes great books and great philosophy and stuff like that. And what a great person this is. And I talk to everybody about my hero. And I have these pictures all over the place, and I emulate my hero in so many different ways and so on. But then I find out that he's done terrible things in his life, maybe yesterday or maybe 25 years ago, that they did terrible things. And now they are a disgrace. That who I blamed, that who I had fame for, now all of a sudden become disgraceful. Or maybe it happens within me, that I did something. I had all this fame, but now they realize what a bum, what a miscreant I am. So now I'm a disgrace to my family and to my friends and my coworkers and so on like that. How much time do I think about those things? So those are the 8 worldly concerns. And if we look at those things and say, they are robbing us from our true nature, how much time would I rather just be quiet and be happy and be satisfied? But I can't be, because I'm like in a washing machine that's going back and forth with all these thoughts.
But how do we know what our true nature is? If they're
Say
all
that again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
say we got all these things in the way.
Yeah,
How do we know what our true nature is?
because you have to experience it. If you don't give your chance to experience it, then those things have succeeded in doing what they want to do. Your ego has won.
Okay, but I experience all these other things too.
What other thing?
All the things you just
You
described.
got to make a choice.
Okay,
You choose.
okay, but if I get to make a choice, I don't know what my true nature is. I'm trying, I'm chasing this to a level of
Well, you're
abstract.
just arguing for the sake of arguing now.
Well, maybe, but yeah, I mean, I don't dispute what you say our true nature is. I just want to know how we know. Or like Gene was saying,
There's no simple answer. You either got to trust
okay,
those who have been there and what they say about it, and
Okay.
that you want to experience that, so you set yourself in the direction of experiencing that yourself.
okay. But I thought Gene made an interesting distinction about whether this state is something we're trying for or something we departed from and has always been there that we obscured. I mean,
Well, it's always been there and we've obscured it. That's the answer. Anybody got a comment about that? Some experience with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're very highly invested in our illusions. They they help us feel secure. They are familiar. They give texture to our reality, and we easily assume that what we can,
Move us over.
the signals from our six senses, you know, it's easy for us to assume that that defines reality. But we have no idea how a fly perceives the world with its multiple eyes, or dogs can hear for miles. So even our own senses are completely imperfect. And I think through meditation, that's my answer. I think through meditation, we get to touch a part of ourselves, or a part of what we share, like in the space between us and the space between our atomic structures. We share that space, and we get to touch that through meditation for moments at a time, and
Glimpses.
glimpses.
Yeah.
And yes, and if you can string some glimpses together, then you can sit in a space where the delusion falls away, and you might not be able to articulate what's there, but you've been there and you recognize it, and you want more, and you get more through meditation and practice.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I think Bhavani and William have their hand up to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say something that it depends. It depends on how much that you really desire this. There's a story that our master told us one time, where the youngster come up to the master and ask him to take him in there, and because he wanted to see God. And the master said, okay, well, before we do anything, we'll have to go down to the river. So the master took him down to the river, and it, like everybody's baptism, he held his head underwater, and the youngster kept kicking and carrying on and everything. And just about the time the kid passed out, why the master picked him up. And he said to him, now, what did you want? He said, I wanted air. He said, now, when you want God that much, you can see him. So your desire has to be there. And you will see it, but you have to want to see it. You can't,
Let
you
me
can't
ask, is there,
BS the thing.
how do you do that? Is there a system in place that you can use to be able to do that, or does it happen all by itself?
I have had a few experiences, and the experiences that I've had have been the first experience I had, well, one of the first experiences I had was when I was a young boy. And that was before I even knew anything about religion, let alone meditation. Another experience that I had was I was reading the Bible, sitting back with my back to a brick wall with the sun shining on my face, was reading a part of the Bible, and I closed up the Bible and I leaned my head back, closed my eyes, and let the sun engulf me, and which was really great. And when the bell rang to that lunch break was over, I walked inside the place where I worked, and it was entirely changed. There was I was a toolmaker. There were machines in there that were 40, 50, 60 years old that looked like they were brand spanking new again.
So
And
what
when
you were seeing old things, but in a new way.
I was seeing old things that were brand spanking new again. And when I turned to see one of my friends, my friend was a ball of incandescent light. And I looked over at some of the other people that were in the room, and they didn't have that incandescence. They didn't have that light. And that lasted for maybe 5 minutes that I was in this condition. But you get this information, and a lot of times you have to sit with the information for weeks at a time if you don't have somebody to help you distill out what it is that you're seeing or what it is that you're doing. And there are, you want to say angels, there are angels walking up and down the street that you would never know unless you could see with this second vision. So I'm limited. I've just scratched the surface.
All right, well, thank you. Well, that's a really good story. Thank you. So sometimes it can happen spontaneously, seemingly automatic, but then
Right.
other times you can recreate it through a prescribed system, and then you have control over it. You know, we talk about that in our dreams are involuntary, but we can have controlled experiences through our meditation. Our dreams may give us a view of something that is purely spiritual, and it may need interpretation, but we can develop that, we can cultivate that interpretation or development through a practice, through a prescribed kind of a meditation. So, and so one happens involuntarily, and we can wait all our lives for that kind of vision to happen to us, that epiphany. And that may be great and may be an inspiration to do something, but then we may have to make a commitment to be able to develop the concentrated meditation to be able to sustain that that vision and to be able to work with that vision and to make it a transformative one that we can truly understand, because we've had a part of creating that. Anybody else got something to say? We're getting close to 9 o'clock here. I'm willing to sit for as long as everybody wants to talk, but so is this a provocative thing? Does it create more questions than answers? Does it create any kind of an answer?
Well, I think questions are good. I mean, I don't, the answer is not important unless the question is.
So what's the takeaway? Well, how does this land with you? You know, either tonight's discussion or the whole discussion that we've been having over the past 8 weeks. How does this land on you?
It lands on me as an opportunity for growth, the specific direction of which I'm not sure. I need to experience it. I think experience and trust are the two words that I resonated with most in this recent discussion. But I find it growth oriented, but it's not a linear path, at least not for me.
Let's assume for a minute that there is reincarnation. Let's say that we've all had prior life. We've got this life, and there's a life coming in front of ourselves. So let's assume that for a minute. So the question becomes, what are the causes for this life? Why do you have this life? So if I can maybe try and answer that, maybe simply, but let me say, it may be retribution for past lives. Someone might think that this life is just full of problems and full of quandary, and there might be some beauty, but basically I'm paying back for something that, you know, happened in a prior life. And this life is just simply a retribution. Other people might say, oh, well, this life gives me an opportunity to continue my education, to further my horizons, to see things that I didn't see before. And I've been given this gift of another life to be able to gather more information, more stuff. And then I'm trying to assimilate it all. And that's part of this gift, is to assimilate all this information.
That's kind of what Rebecca said a few weeks ago about when I was asking the question about multiple lives. And she said, another life is another chance, or words to that effect. And I hadn't thought of it that way,
But then maybe this life, a third possibility is maybe this life is simply here to help others. Maybe it's a combination of all three. Or can we recognize that we have this gift of life? And what are we going to do with it? And what are the potentials? What are our potentials? And are we living up to our potentials? Anybody want to comment on that?
One would probably say that just to be, this precious human life, just to be here at this time, at this space, talking about these things with open eyes and open hearts, means that we've been on the Bodhisattva path before, and what that means is that we're still on the Bodhisattva path. It's just where the pathway is obscured to us at the moment because we have no memory of previous lifetimes, and we're not able to envision what is mostly inconceivable. But it's easy to want to be alive for the sake of others.
Well, thank you. Okay, anybody else got anything? We're going to leave this meeting with a big question mark. Maybe that's the hook to bring you back. This is the cliffhanger. What's the next step?
You, just to clarify, we're not meeting again until January 3rd. But at one point, I thought there was discussion of having some open sessions that we just sort of kick things around. I don't know what came of that.
Well, I've only got one piece of feedback on that, and I'm willing to meet next week or even the week after that. We've got these 2 weeks during the, the holiday season here, and I'm happy to meet, but I'd like, y'all to decide what it is you want to talk about. If we want to have an open discussion about a couple, 3 things, whatever is fine with me, but let's define it. If you want to take the time off, that's fine too.
Oh, come on, Lance, let's get out of here.
Who said that? All right, well, I'll tell you what, we'll leave it this way. If you want to write me and discuss it with me on the phone or write an email, we can do that and we can schedule it. And personally, I don't care if it's just one of you. I'm willing to meet with anybody almost any time, and we can have a conversation and talk about things. So otherwise, we'll say we're not going to meet until January 3rd. So, in the old country, when you come in to meet the teacher, you just sit there and meditate until somebody asks the teacher a question. So we'll leave it at that right now. All right, so we're going to go to our books. We're going to do our dedication. So our dedication is for the benefit of the enlightenment of all beings. That whatever we've learned tonight, whatever wisdom we've gathered, whatever skillful means we've learned to be able to think about or to engage in conversation, we are dedicating that to the enlightenment of other people. So first we pay homage to our lineage masters, to those who have come before us, who have been the guiding light for us to get to this point. So in this first paragraph, we pay homage to them. And then we set our aspiration for enlightenment. And so each of these paragraphs then, starting on page 18 and continuing through the end of this section, is our dedication. So I recite. Dorje Chang, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Dormalur Gampopa, Pagma Drupa, and Lordri Kumpa. Please bestow upon us the most auspicious blessing of all the Kagyu Lamas. By this virtue, may I achieve the all-knowing state, and may all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara by defeating all enemies, confusion, the cause of suffering. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind, where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. I pray that the Lama may have good health. I pray that the Lama may have long life. I pray that your Dharma activities spread far and wide. I pray that I may not be separated from you. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all merit for all sentient beings. By the blessing of the Buddha who attained the three kayas, by the blessing of the truth of the unchanging Dharma as such, by the blessing of the indivisible Sangha order, may the merit I share bear fruit. By the virtues collected on the three times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, may I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood, enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Sri Kompa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. This dedication prayer by Lord Jigdan Sumgon, this prayer is over 800 years old. All these prayers are over 800 years old. This one was written by the founder of our lineage 800 years ago. Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the three times by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mayas and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings from my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. And through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. Om, Ah, Hom. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all beings. Thank you all very much. Thank you truly for 8 weeks of your attention and being here and asking good questions, having good thoughts, sharing your thoughts, being very candid many times. So thank you very much for that. It's a wonderful thing that we have. Many of us have been together for several years doing this, and it's unimaginable how wonderful it is. So thank you.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Lance, will the next section be 8 weeks as well? Is it going to be similar?
Yes, and I'll have to define it. I'll take a look at that. But we're going to
Okay.
start off with the Lama giving us the story of the Buddha in
Yes.
January.
Okay.
So yeah, so it should be very good. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
Thank
Lance.
you.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Lance.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have
night.
happy holidays if I don't see you. If we decide to have a meeting, I'll let everybody know, and you're all invited. I'll send an email to everybody.